Welcome to Wild Heart Revival, a gathering place for heartfelt conversations and stories as pathways of renewal and revival. I am your host, Tay Tayari, and today's guest is Brooke Fenton. I stepped away from this conversation with Brooke feeling both light and grounded, as if I had been lifted up while rooting down. It felt like a simple recalibration moment with a dear friend, and I hope that it resonates in such a way for you too. Brooke is a healing arts guide with a background in yoga, Ayurveda, Qigong, and shamanic practices. She is dedicated to the study of energy and plant medicines and is moved by the power of storytelling. For the past decade, Brooke has lived in various places throughout North, Central, and South America, as well as Europe and Asia. She is currently being held by the mountains of the Sacred Valley in Peru, deepening her practices and continuing to learn from the plants. She offers online classes, workshops, and retreats internationally, as well as one-on-one mentorships and in-person and/or distance healing sessions. When not tending to the temple arts practices, Brooke can be found singing, writing, or playing somewhere in nature. If you're curious about any of my other offerings, such as the personalized threshold counseling that I provide for individuals and couples, or if you're interested in reading my latest essays, simply visit coyotecouncil.earth. You'll find a direct link in the show notes. Additionally, you're invited to subscribe to our monthly newsletter, which provides updates on new podcast episodes alongside other creative happenings. You can subscribe on our website. Now, I want to invite you into a deeper state of embodied presence as we turn our attention to this wonderful conversation with Brooke Fenton.
I'm just lighting this bundle of dried herbs that remind me of the North to open this space and offer this prayer to the moment. Just by starting with gratitude for being here with my good friend Tay and the invitation to show up more fully. Great Spirit, Mother, Creator, this is your daughter, Brooke. Thank you for your presence in my life and all the lives of the ones that I know and love. On this day, I ask for your guidance in this connection, in this conversation, to speak clearly from my heart, with a heart wide open, that the words that move through me and my friend Tay can be for the greater benefit of not just ourselves and our connection, but the people and the beings that tune into this conversation. And I just want to call in the spirit of the 5 elements of metal and fire, of water and earth, of air, and everything that is above and everything that is below. Just taking a moment to tune into the center of the heart, noticing the aliveness in my being in this moment, and thanking you deeply for your presence in this space. And so it is. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So before we started recording, we were talking about how it might be nice to begin this conversation by discussing what it means to us to have some kind of heart-centered presence in our lives. And you actually reminded me of a quote, and so I'm going to share that with you here. And it's by Rubem Alves. And he says, "Hope is hearing the melody of the future, and faith is dancing to that melody in the here and now."
Wow.
And so, yeah. And so it seems that to be fully here and now and to have a relationship with faith in such a way, it means that we really do need to be rooted in our hearts.
Mm,
And so I guess I just want to offer that to you. I don't even have a question. I just want to offer that to you. And
mm.
I'd like to know what's present here with that offering.
Thank you. I'm just going to receive that, bring it into my hands, which feels like the place I'm coming to begin every time I tune into presence, just to preface this a little bit, I've been so deeply in love with my practice of Qigong
Mm,
and the way that tuning into my hands, an extension of my heart, of this body, of this vessel containing this soul and connected to spirit, has been helping me move and transform.
mm,
And it's like what I think of when I tune into the heart is just the word honor comes up right now. And what I appreciate about these unscripted conversations is like it's an invitation to come into the presence and honor what is,
mm,
And so even just like resting here for a moment and witnessing the moment as my hand is on my heart, and maybe anyone that's listening can like feel invited to do the same.
mm,
That's really when I tune into my deepest prayer, is how to feel the aliveness of this moment here with you that I'm sharing, and in my body to fully arrive with the information that is coming through my eyes as I look out this window and see the wind and the green of the leaves and the mountain.
mm,
It's like it can be, I'm grateful for this opportunity, because these words sometimes that I'm sharing, that I'm speaking, feel like they've been pressed down in my heart out of fear or out of shame or from unworthiness not being received in the past. So it's like, wow, just to tune in with a prayer like we started, and the question to say, hey, like what's going on, that to me is so deeply therapeutic. And that's a prayer that I continue to explore in myself, how to integrate that to be it,
mm,
as so many wise ones have said. It's like less about explaining, at least from this perspective that I've received a lot of wisdom teachings from it. It's less about the explaining of the thing and
mm,
just simply to be it.
mhm,
And it's so humbling, it's so humbling to move through many, many different ways of arriving into that moment. And I actually find myself arriving into that moment right now here with you. Like, can honestly say there was like some nervousness and like anticipation, but now it's just like, wow, I feel really alive.
mm.
Just it's like, what's going on in your heart, girl? So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Mm. This is, yeah, this has been an ever important prayer, inquiry, orientation for me. I mean, obviously, the name of this project is Wild Heart Revival.
Nice.
So it's it's very much a
Mm,
focus, this living dialogue focused around what this really means to us as a collective, as a community, what it means to explore that in the living dynamic moment with all the history and the knowing and the wisdom that we carry into this moment. But it is a momentary thing. And I've noticed that the more I'm able to remember my heart in the moment, not just to remember my anatomical, biological oscillator of a heart that's beating in every moment and hasn't stopped since I was in the womb. It's a tiny little thing like that. but also the deep well, the deep well that is the spiritual heart that connects me
Mm.
to everything in such a profound way that I can't put words to it, but I can feel it. And the more I'm able to just remember that, there is, like you said, this humbling that happens. And it just, the, that's when I know, that's when I know that I'm really touching into my heart, is when I
Mm.
feel a visceral sensation of being humbled. And what does that mean? I guess, well, I want to
Mm.
ask you, what does that mean for you? When do you know that
Mm.
you are really being humbled in a moment? Yeah,
That is such a beautiful question. I don't think I've ever considered this before, and it's so somatic.
yeah.
It's so somatic for me. It's like the place my mind went to was many times being around a fire in a ceremony with a
Mm,
teacher, and that moment of humbling coming through when I just want to bow. Like, it's not even that I just want to, I have to.
yeah.
I come to my
Mm,
knees, literally, maybe partially out of like the physical sensations moving through my body and bringing me down low, because to sit up
mm,
is just so much in that
mm,
moment. But humbling is like to, yeah, there's this like reverential just, and I often share this with my students in Qigong classes, after we've moved through a series of forms, is like we'll do one form to integrate and actually invite the brain to bow down to the heart and the hands. So
mm.
there's like, that's humbling for me too. That's how I weave those um, deeper experiences of ceremony into like weaving the mystical into the mundane, that beautiful phrase.
Yeah.
But it's kind of just this like, not making myself small, but like honoring how small I am, and then the bigness of life happening
Mhm,
all around me
mhm.
with an evenness, not with a greater than or lesser than energy, but just like this is a part of the way things are in this moment, and this feels true.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what humbling feels like for me.
Beautiful response. Thank you. I went off in so many directions. I'm going to try and gather what feels most
Mm.
important. There's so much in
Mm.
that actually. When you really tune into what it means to be humble, it's like, whoa, it's vast and also it's momentary. But
Mhm.
I'm learning about, well, first off, I'm reminded of this quote by Carl Jung. I shared it in one of the other interviews, but it feels relevant right now. And he says, people, or modern people, don't find God because they don't look low enough.
Mm.
And I think that there's so many ways to interpret that, but right now I'm recognizing that to come into some kind of meaningful relationship with what we know to be as God in the moment, there there's this necessity to humble ourselves. And you say that there's this like this sense of like bowing down, you know,
Mm.
going down to the earth almost. And Carl Jung, in that phrase, that's what he's suggesting. It's like go down low, because that's where it's in that act of humility, that action of humility, where we open ourselves up to something beyond ourselves. And
Mm.
I'm learning about Tantra right now. I'm specifically reading a book about Tantra right now. And I was just learning this morning. The author is Osho, and he was
Mm.
exploring the difference between action and activity. And he's saying that activity is this kind of like compulsive, obsessive quality where we like feel like we always need to be doing something. It's when you're really in the doer mode. And that action is this natural humbling into the moment, this emptying, this reverential witnessing of what's alive in the moment, and letting it in, and then allowing it to naturally move us, like being really moved by the flows of the moment. And yeah, yeah, I'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
It's just making me think of a recent experience I had that
You
feels
share.
like it's speaking to this so beautifully. I last week, a week today, I was with a really dear friend, and we went to this beautiful mountain called Quinsacocha. In Quechua, Quinsa means three, and Cocha means lake. So it's
Okay.
a community where there's these huge lakes. And I noticed as you were speaking about activity, it's like all the preparations, because we were going to go and have a ceremony there together. And we're in
Mm,
the rainy season right now, so you never know what you're going to encounter high up on the mountain. So we had our bags full, and I had the dog with me, and I could see that everything leading up until the moment that we got in the taxi was this like series of activities, right?
mm,
Like, gotta get this, like, fill my water bottle with hot water. Did I put lemon in it? Like, just thinking all these things. Like, I want to have everything dialed in so that we just have an
right.
awesome time. And then when we got in the taxi, we were both just like, just felt this drop. And like for 45 minutes, we were just being carried up this windy road. And it felt kind of like the passageway through to presence.
Yeah.
And then arriving there, and we decided to bring some cacao and some niños, some psilocybin mushrooms,
Mm,
into our day. And this is also, like, I guess, another direction we can maybe explore later. But what that moment really was for me, after a couple of hours of walking with the sun like blazing down on us, and then rain clouds just like pouring down on us 10 minutes later, just
mm,
moving forward on this one path, and having that felt like the only direction really that we could go, and we just kept going. And that to me felt like just acting and being guided, not like being with these activities, but the moment that the spirit of the plants really started to blossom in us, it happened kind of at the same time in this
mm,
synchronistic way. And it was kind of, again, bringing in that, what does humbling feel like? Because it was like, oh, I actually am going to come down to the ground for a second and look at where we've just come from, and this incredible, like, blue lake with just clouds, just feeling like we were in the sky. And then turning around to continue the walk and moving from a different place,
mm,
moving from my roots. Like before, I was moving from my mind, but actually moving from my roots slowly and prayerfully.
yeah.
And that's just what you were sharing made me think of, because I'm still, I guess, integrating the beauty and the wisdom of that day, of that moment. And the last thing I'll share is to act on our impulses when they really feel true. There was a
Mm,
moment when we were walking back, and we'd just been in like 45 minutes of gray, cold wind and rain. And then this beam of light came just like blasting through the clouds. And I had this impulse to sing The Circle of Life from The Lion King, because that movie has just touched me
mm,
so deeply. And we both were just in that space, like really owning it, with no one else around but the birds and the rocks and the
oh,
mountains. And as soon as we ended, it started to rain again, and the sun went away. And we were just like, I'm glad we acted on this feeling to
yeah.
sing, to share, to express, because we were also exploring that in our journey of like just unbounded free expression.
Mm, I love that. I
Yeah.
love
That's
and
my story.
expression. No, that was great. Wow, there's so much richness in that. I love that you brought up your roots, because that's
Mm,
another thing I think Carl Jung was alluding to, is like not only the ground in which you stand, but the roots that go into the ground in which you stand, you know?
mm-hmm,
Um, if you're focused up here and up high and always gazing to the sky for the sky father God to guide you, and you don't remember that your roots are keeping you nourished and nurtured, and that those roots go deep into the earth, that you're really not going to be whole. You're not going to receive God's love and wisdom in a wholesome way. And you're not
mm,
going to be able to express in an unbounded way, too,
mm,
right? If you're not connected, like really connected to your roots, there's no way for you to be able to actually express unbounded because you don't have the foundation from which that
mm,
expression can move authentically.
mm.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the heart again, what we were starting with, and how, if we're looking at this from more of like a subtle energy perspective, like when you were speaking, I was just feeling my heart, and it feels like sometimes it's floating,
Mm,
like it's this temple, it's this pearl, it's this treasure box that's like floating, suspended in this body and also outside of my body, because
mm,
it feels right now, it's feeling your heart,
mm,
and that's like to me the power of um I've been working a lot with distance connection, through just the prayer that we can touch one another in this
mm,
way. But that sometimes, and that's been my experience, when my heart is floating, it's just, it's calling out, it's like screaming for those roots. It's like,
mm.
hey, like, don't forget your feet, don't forget your skin, don't forget every single thing that is working with me here
Yeah.
to hold you in space. And when you said that, Carl Jung, that quote about like finding God and being bent down low, it really made me think of just the this word belonging too, and
Mm,
how I feel like that comes into my experience so much, because it's been such a deep theme for me of like, what does belonging mean, being a traveler? Maybe you relate to this, like, where's home? And we uproot ourselves from an Airbnb or from a
mm.
community after a month or 3 months, and then like, that makes me think of belonging a lot. And I'm curious to hear from you. That kind of
Yeah.
feels like a nice direction to move into,
Yeah.
of
Wow.
belonging.
That's a big one for me for sure.
Hmm.
You mentioned the word home, and I don't have a sense of home. I have a sense of home within myself, and in certain moments that can feel like enough, but if I'm being honest, most of the time it doesn't.
Be honest.
I
Yeah.
don't I don't think that we're meant to feel a complete sense of home just only within ourselves.
Mm,
I think that someone can, some like very conscious, nearly or fully enlightened being, right? Because you're there at home just in the flow of creation. But I'm very human and I'm very caught in my humanity in most moments. And that causes me to feel very stranded with the
mm,
lifestyle that I've chosen. But I've chosen this lifestyle to go far away from the lands in which I was born because I didn't feel a sense of home there. And actually, I never really felt a sense of home even when I was a young boy, child. I'm sure I did at some point when I was real young, but most of my memories have this pervasive sense of feeling alienated.
mm,
So I've carried that forward throughout my whole life. I'm now 29 years old, and I still feel that most of my days, most of my interactions, most of the communities that I feel into. And yeah, the past year and a half, I have not set down any roots anywhere. I've been in Central America bopping around, partly because I have to bop around due to legislation and laws, and also because I haven't felt anywhere where it's felt worth it to like put in the gritty effort to put any roots down. I've had a sense that I've been searching for the right land for that, and that once I find the land that I feel most drawn to, then the people will be there, that the land would
mm,
organize the people around me. I don't know if that's the truth, but that's a sense. But I'm also recognizing that the more I can tap into the authenticity of my being and hollow out in many ways, kind of uncarve my block, as the Zen Buddhists would say, that the stronger the field of my heart becomes, and it becomes this kind of gravitational pull. And I'm noticing that it's pulling in people naturally without much effort that feel more aligned with the essence of who I am. And
Mm.
so I guess I'm noticing recently that there is a lot of power in tuning into the deeper sense of who I know myself to be, because then that extends out and there's this natural gravity that then connects me in resonance to those who are going to be aligned and are going to be nourishing for me and me for them. And so I
Mm.
have brought in some people. And then that makes me realize, like, okay, well, then how do we collaborate to create a sense of home? Particularly recently, being really in love with this woman in a way I've never felt before. How do we create a sense of home? And so now it's a collaborative effort, and
Mm.
that feels more doable. So that's how I'll respond to your inquiry. I'm curious to know about you in that way.
Mm. Well, it's very rich, and I appreciate in depth with, you know, your response around it, because there's many parts it brings me into, but I come to relationship with mother when
Mm,
as I have been studying and investigating and learning from this theme of home, belonging, embodiment. They all feel like one and the same thing. Embodiment feels like home,
mm,
right? So I'll share a little bit of context. I was recently diagnosed with hypothyroidism, which the thyroid gland is incredibly important in the body, and I didn't realize it before
yeah.
coming into awareness that this was moving through my body, but it's like a second brain. And my thyroid has been underactive, so it's not producing enough of this hormone that is so essential to the body
Mm,
functioning optimally. And my mom, Donna, was also diagnosed with this in her late 20s. And I was conscious of this growing up, but it only really became important in this past few months when I was just feeling so out of sorts, for
mm,
lack of a better phrase, and navigating being here in Peru again for the third time in a year and a half. My heart opening to this love with this beautiful man, and being far from home in a time of the holidays when it's so deeply nostalgic for me, and it holds so much energy. I think
mm,
in the young version of myself that is I'm still very deeply in connection with, and I'm learning from every single day. And so there was a lot going on, from the portal of like November to February. And I started to look at my relationship with my mom, and with a lot of curiosity, because it feels like this inheritance, this code that my body has received. And I'm receiving that with in this moment. Before, maybe it wasn't so easy, but with a lot of gratitude, because of the way it has reoriented me to how I tend my home
mm,
and to the food that I bring into this house, to the kinds of experiences or people or um, places that I'm choosing to spend my time in, because it's all contributing to this overall feeling of wellness and rootedness. And with my mom, I mean, I know it will be a lifelong journey and exploration. Um, but I bring all of this up just because when I think about belonging and my relationship to her, lately there's always just kind of this, again, this somatic response in my body of a missing, of a longing to physically hold and touch the body from which I came, and also to share my love with her, and my family, that is an extension of her. And so, you know, um, this is deeply important to me right now, because I would say that this journey started, and that's another story, with being basically asked to leave the home that I felt would be my home,
Mm,
that I was putting my moon blood into the earth every month and praying, and really felt this like ancestral connection to this beautiful place in Ontario, and then through a series of events was asked to leave.
mm,
So this whole journey, really, of a year and a half in new lands, has been one of belonging, of feeling moments of being this like castaway, being this like you have no place, because the place you knew didn't have enough space for you anymore. Or at least that's what it felt like in my experience at the time.
mm,
And it's a beautiful thing to reflect on, because there's been so much charge in my body, and I can feel that held in my belly and in my chest, of this like ache for just knowing what it was like to have a moment in time of experiencing living on the land in community and having it actually kind of work. And then leaving that and coming back into this place of like solitude, lone wolfness. And now really reflecting on the theme of mother, as I'm held in this bowl of mountain energy, um, and coming into changes in my body, in my hormones. It's also connected, feeling the call to mother
mm,
myself, but
mhm,
knowing that that is also a thing that will come if it wants to, and it will, and not wanting to push. But I don't know, in this moment, Tay, there's just like thinking about home, and maybe it's because I have settled and chosen to be here.
mhm,
It just is. It's like, and that's bringing a lot of love to actually my mother,
mm,
or just tending and keeping a home.
right.
It's carving a lot more respect and acceptance
Yeah.
for sometimes the sacrifices that are made when you stop being just a singular being and you expand yourself to hold more space for a partnership or a child or a garden or a community.
Mm,
And that is very humbling.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Thank you for sharing all that. I'm reminded of a quote again I want to share. It's actually from Charles Eisenstein. He
Mm,
says, "Know that your longing to belong is a sacred treasure. Cherish your longing. Celebrate it. Don't suppress it. When you nourish that longing with your attention and your acceptance, it will generate opportunities for you to connect intimately with others and the world. And because you have held it as precious, you will recognize those opportunities and you will act on them. By doing that, you will be an agent for others to manifest their own longing to belong because they will come into connection with you."
mm,
And I mean, there's just so many directions to go right now in my mind, but I was reminded again of the roots, and it made me think of the roots of our plant relatives, and you're bringing up the mother, and I was thinking of like the great mother, Mother Earth, also just the mother archetype of cosmos, the divine feminine, and how the plant beings tend to be more I mean, they're dynamic like all beings, but there is this, they hold the feminine so beautifully, and some of course more than others. And I know that you have been in relationship with some really potent plant spirits of recent times, and I'm curious to go in that direction with you now, and maybe, if it feels relevant and right, how these relationships have sustained or nurtured, nourished your roots and your connection to mother.
mm. Nice. Thank you for moving in this direction. Well, it makes me think of ancestry, and I came here to Peru to sit with ayahuasca 2 Octobers ago, and I mean, yeah, there's like a stilling that comes, just to come into the frequency, because these spirits are so powerful. It actually makes me think of last night I was watching Avatar.
The second one,
And
first one.
I guess the first one, but the real life version on
Yeah,
Netflix.
yeah, okay. Oh, Avatar Airbender?
Yeah.
Live action one?
Yes. Not
Okay,
the blue
right.
creatures.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay,
The live version of Avatar, the series that was animated.
yeah.
And there's this episode where the firebenders are coming and they're wanting to attack the water kingdom, and what they do, their tactic to take away their power, is to kill and to steal the moon. So they have this knife that can like kill and destroy the spirit of the moon, and when the moon is not on the planet, everything falls out of balance. So I bring that up because that to me was this thread into what the spirit of these master plants like ayahuasca or wachuma or the mushrooms they seem to hold this balance. They seem to be holding this balance, and that's what it's been for me, of like, at times when I came here and my heart was so hurt, and and it was just like, it wasn't in here in my chest. It was outside of me, it was behind me, it was like above me, deeply below me, in Canada, while my body was here, and I felt so discombobulated. So sitting over nearly a decade with a pretty steady rhythm, but moments of deep pause with ayahuasca especially, feels like it has carved into my bones and my blood this like responsibility to myself that I continue to learn from every day, especially in being distanced from sitting with that medicine right now. Like what just happened when you asked, I felt this need to kind of pause, because there was this like redistribution of chemicals in my body. And so yeah, they have helped me and continue to help me orient to the sky and to the roots, and to really nourish that bridge between those two places of my heart by their wonderful and magical and mysterious way of spiraling, right? Like ayahuasca specifically feels like every time I've sat with her spirit, because it feels like a feminine spirit to me, it has spiraled out the unnecessary parts to give it back to life, because I am carrying energy that the earth, I believe, wants. And there is energy in the earth, like jumping in a really cold lake when it's hot, that's just like, come, be here. Yeah. Jump in already, like just go for it. Yeah. And that's an exchange. So the plants are like a conversation non-verbally with the elements. And I guess that weaves in my own curiosity and fascination with more of the 5-element theory of Chinese medicine and Qigong and the yin and the yang, and these symbols and codes that have existed for so long beyond my lifetime that seem to sustain the great balance of things. amidst a time of so much change. So yeah, they are true teachers, you know. They are true teachers in this way of just quietly and very presently continuing to grow,
Mm-hmm.
literally, and also in my consciousness, in the consciousness of the planet, I believe. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm. Yeah. I think you said like the great balance and how the elements are all dancing within, through, together in this incredible harmony. And that we, of course, are made up of that dance. We are a part of it. And there just seem to be certain aspects of our being that are more related to certain elements, you know? It's like every aspect of our being has within it every element, and yet like our emotional and felt sense experience is definitely more watery, or our sense of having a ground and a right to be here is definitely more earthy. And then that sense of power and organization and the drive to take action is definitely fiery, you know, so on. And it does seem like it all comes together in that great balance within us, within our own individual human vessel. It comes to balance within our hearts.
Mm.
And I'm reminded of, do you know Stephen Buhner?
Mhm.
Yeah. It's
Love him.
one of my greatest teachers of just like gone so deep into everything that he's offered, because it just resonates so much with him. He died last year, I think.
Oh.
That's his soul. Yeah. Yeah. He had quite a rough sickness at the end of his life that just couldn't be healed. But anyway, the way in which he shares his teachings, his perspective, his orientation toward communicating with the plant realm, the plant beings, is that it happens most fluidly, most clearly, most authentically through the heart.
Mm.
And I'm just recognizing this moment that makes sense, because the plant beings, we think of them to be so earthy, but I think that they are exemplars of what it means to be in balance, which means that all the elements are finding that great balance within them and their expression. And so then it makes sense that for us to communicate and be in right relationship with the plants, that we need to establish that balance within ourselves, which inevitably comes into the center of our being and our hearts. And so I guess I'm bringing the conversation back to that. We don't need to stay there, but I'm just recognizing that really is our balancing point. And I wonder, so then that makes me think too about integration. And you're saying that you have are having some space from ayahuasca particularly right now. And so it makes me think about integration, which is certainly an act of balancing, in the wake of powerful communicative processes with the spirit of ayahuasca or whatever medicine. And so I'd be curious to know more about your orientation toward integration, and maybe even some very specific modalities or tools, practices that you are utilizing at this time in your life as you integrate the experiences you've had in the past.
Washing the dishes.
There you go. Yeah. Every
I
time.
mean it though, like
Sure.
finding a good soap and
Yeah.
a good sponge,
Yeah.
because this is sense, you know, it's like integrating the bigger senses
Yeah.
with the senses that I have.
Yeah.
So I literally was saying this to my partner the other day. I'm like, I love this sponge, you know? And I
Mm.
saw a video of like someone that I really love who has made a line of sponges. And I was like, wow, you know, that's her business. She's thriving. These like
Whoa.
biodegradable sponges. And it really tuned me into the
Mm.
tools at hand,
Mm.
these ordinary things that
Yeah.
exist in my home
Mhm.
that are asking to be connected with just through the simple act of washing a pot after I've cooked oatmeal. And I say that, you know, in jest, but I do mean it because it's been the basic movements of life that right now are, I'm learning so much in them. I'm learning that I don't need to be seeking perhaps as much for these big
Mhm.
experiences or fantastical ways of receiving a download. It's just like, no, it's time to do this now and wash the dishes. And then it's also shifting the chi, right? It's shifting the
Yeah.
chi because ayahuasca has shifted deep chi in my being, and I recognize that. And there's still a lot I'm learning about that on like a organ health level and just the biochemical level of what actually happens when the body receives that amount of DMT.
Mm.
So I think it's just been, you know, like attuning myself. Like right now, I have this clay bowl in front of me, and I have it here because it has my smudge. But I'm also it's a grounding tool.
Mm.
It's a grounding tool in moments when like you've shared something that has set my mind in three different directions to come back here and just presence and
Yeah.
feel and connect.
Mm.
So it's again bringing in the elements, like tuning into water by integrating the insight or that like aha moment from from a ceremony by weaving the prayer into the ordinary. I also feel like keeping an altar and trusting myself in that process because it has not been one where I've been initiated into like, you know, there are many lineages, beautiful lineages and schools of thought where you learn how to, you know, carve the sacred onto your altar. And for a time in more of my yogic um, moments when I was in my yogic practices, that was something I was exploring. But it's just also now been this more organic,
Mm.
like, it's time to bring some more flowers here. The same way in ceremony when someone was purging and someone would bring the smudge. It's like, it's time for that. This is going
Mm.
to help me balance out my internal and my external environment. And
Mm.
that just like the external really being this canvas of my internal experience. And I've just come into a deeper and deeper appreciation of having less and valuing more the pieces that I do keep. Um, and that is something, I guess, to come into your question around the practices or the tools. So there's, you know, just maintaining the spirit, because it is a spirit. It's not like a thing of being clean. It's like a spirit. They say
Mm.
saucha in yogic philosophy, like purity.
Mm.
So that's a practice that I tune into every day and keeping the altar and inviting, you know, new colors based off of what is I'm needing to connect with more. If it is more fire, and right now my altar cloth is red, that feels like
Mm.
it holds that rooted blood, passionate charge for me.
Mm.
And and I guess the other practice which I've kind of referenced a couple of times is qigong because it combines for me this practice of dance and intuition and bridging cosmic energy with like deep subterranean spirit into
Mm.
this body, which I am, which we all are, with, you know, a crown and feet that are always in this like telluric field.
Mm.
Um, receiving codes. So yeah, I would say I like things in threes. Those three things have really been touchstones for me, and are helping me, like, in this moment, I guess, feel the need to connect with it by actually imbibing it and just orient to that frequency in a different way.
Yeah.
Um, mhm.
Mm. I love the how you initially answered about washing the dishes. I love washing the dishes, and actually, if I'm at like a like a party of sorts or a gathering with friends, I'll always be the one to go and wash the dishes because I'm recognizing in this moment that it's actually a rebalancing moment because of course you have the water, you have ideally like I carry with me clay bowls and plates and cups everywhere I go, and so the plate or the dishes can represent that earthy element, especially if they are more clay or something. And then there's the heat of the hot water, and so there's the fire there, and it's a space where I'm able to tune into my breath. Like I purposely choose to breathe more deeply and feel my feet rooted on the ground, and to find also a rhythm. you know there's a rhythm that happens with turning the water on and off and grabbing the thing and scrubbing the thing, and so it's like this rhythmic dance of integrating the elements at the kitchen sink that allows me to integrate whatever happened during the conversation, during the dinner, with all the different people and all the different energies. It's like a safe zone to kind of integrate all that energy into a center point within myself. So thank you for that
Totally.
reflection. You allowed me to see that more deeply, and put some more meaning to it, which it felt meaningful, and now I can put a story to it, which is nice. Um, but I was reminded when you were speaking of John O'Donohue, I believe. He's this amazing Irish poet. You know of him?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
so good. But one of the things he says is that we are clay people,
Hmm.
clay people. And I mean, it could mean so many things to him, and he definitely explores it a bit. But I think he's also offering it to the reader. Like, what does that mean to you? You know? And of course, clay is this interesting balance of the elements where it's not solid earth, it's not water, it's somewhere in between. You need the right amount of balance for there to be clay. And then when it's in right balance, you can shape it, you know, and you can kind of shape it into anything you want. And so there's this creative potentiality, this creative
Hmm.
capacity that is inherent within the balance of the clay. And so to think of ourselves as that we have this creative capacity within us to mold ourselves, to also be molded. And this is the important thing to remember. Being a clay
Yes.
people means that we can be molded if you're not paying attention, right? And that tends to happen
Hmm.
to most of us. And at some point, by luck or by God or intention or all of it together, you come to realize that you can take creative control. Control might not be the right word, but you can have a life centric leadership around how that
Hmm.
molding and unmolding and remolding can happen. And so, in light of all that, I'm curious to know, where do you feel like you've been molded in ways where you've
Hmm.
had to remold yourself to take that life-centric leadership role and to kind of like muster up the creative potential within in order to reshape yourself? What comes up for you now that feels significant in that way?
Yeah. Wow. I love this question, and I love, it's like everything references back to energy medicine for me because we do clay forms in qigong. There's actually it's called covered in mud, and it's a standing meditation where you just stand in a position that's a little bit awkward. It's also nourishing your stomach, spleen, and pancreas in the process. But it was first making me think of that and how every time I choose to stay in a shape that brings up some resistance, it molds me. It molds this like it's like a softening with that practice specifically. And I notice in my students as well, because it's not as fluid as other forms or dynamic or like engaged. But that's something I deeply appreciate about the quality of earth and being on this earth, is that it's interactive and it's changeable, and it's, yeah, the molding is an ever evolving kind of situation that we find ourselves in. So to answer your question, the thing that comes up the strongest for me is kind of referencing back to this time I was speaking about earlier with being in a community in Ontario, where I'm from, and being deeply woven in that chapter into this collective. And one day, I had been, I think, choosing, yeah. I had been choosing to push down parts of my spirit and my heart energy and my will and my truth to appease and entertain a situation I found myself woven into with one person. And one day I woke up and it just felt like everything I had shaped myself into, this kind of context, this version of myself, was just not working anymore. And it was around the Lionsgate portal in August so if anyone's listening that is tuned into the potency of that day, it can often bring a lot of radical transformation. And I found myself in this unexpected outburst of rage, this catharsis, and it wasn't just mine. It was from behind me. I felt my grandmother. I felt just a lot of charge as I walked into this beautiful place in this land, in nature, and started to release sounds and grunts and anger from my throat that had been, I think, trained to not go there because it was too much. It was just too much. There wasn't enough room or space to be in this body as a woman with that much emotion. You know, we've heard this many times, and it's something I continue to explore. But anyway, it felt like that like pulled a plug out of me in every single possible way that I could imagine, to a point that I was so raw for a while after I lost my voice, because I just was, it was like there was this deep cry and ache and like a roar that couldn't be contained. And it felt almost like a cleansing through myself and on that land. It felt like this fire that burned, but the way that fires sometimes need to burn to create more fertility, right? To welcome space for more things to grow. So I found myself slowly walking away from that place because I needed to repair and restore and give space naturally. And that leaving, and I remember when I bought my ticket to Peru, it was just like initiating my instincts. That was the thread. That was the piece calling me here. Was an initiation of my instincts, because my instincts felt like they'd been so bottled up or kind of like compartmentalized to only act on those instincts in the right moment. But then afterwards, I was like, there is is no right moment. And I've just been conditioned to believe it as such. This
Right.
is the moment. And if I'm
Yeah.
going to speak something because I need to, it's going to happen. And
Mm,
that's, it comes back to the thyroid, it comes back to home, it comes back to the heart. It's everything that I
mm,
feel there was this something that had the way I'd even been holding my body in space, especially my upper body,
mm,
shifted, and it continues to from that point. So I'm learning now in the process of being away from the familiar and learning how to open my voice again. It's been a long time that I've felt the safety to really sing, and I am here. I believe in ways to be singing and sharing the gift of song. But that moment really, as much as it opened me, it kind of shifted and molded me and formed me into a space of needing to contain for a while.
mm,
You know, there's like the inhalation and the exhalation. So there was this great kind of exhalation, and then I found myself going into this inhalation. And actually, it's only just recently that I truly feel my spirit exhaling, and um, and it's something that brings up a lot of energy in me because I'm asking in my prayers how I can most authentically honor all of that time that was and that continues to be, so that I can possibly support, you know, other beings that find themselves in these situations, because how many of us feel like we can't really just speak our truth. So I love
yeah.
what you're doing with this podcast, to tell
Mm,
our story, to
mm,
be received in
mm,
everything with no judgment or with no like, I don't know if I can carry this right now, just to be
mm.
the expression of life from our
Yeah.
hearts.
Yeah.
So I would say, just to kind of culminate all of that, it's been a deep dive into the caverns of this heart space that is the bridge to the throat and the voice and the way that I communicate myself and in this world. So I'm grateful for a moment to be able to share that
Mm,
here with you
yeah.
and anyone that's listening.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're all grateful as well. I'll speak on behalf of everyone listening. I'm certainly grateful, and your voice is so needed because there's a lot of medicine in your true expression. There's medicine in everyone's true expression. This
Oh,
is I do counsel work with individuals and couples now. It's like my source of it's my life's work right now. Well, alongside these creative things as well. I see this as not being separate. It's like an extension of that, you know? And something
mm,
that I'm recognizing in my private work with clients is how pervasive it is that my clients and people that I know in my life don't have this sense of freedom in being able to express who they are, how they know themselves to be, what they need, what they want, what they desire, that there's so many blockages that hold them back from that. And I recognize it in my own life tremendously. And it's interesting. It's so fascinating to be in the role I'm in, where I set these containers, these hopefully therapeutic containers, conversations to offer people some kind of refuge to be able to unfurl and settle enough so that that natural uprising can really come to fruition, and that we can notice the blocks, we can notice the hindrances, and we can tend to them, we can hold them, love them enough so that they can dissolve to some kind of
mm,
meaningful amount, degree. And so to be doing that with people But then to look at my own life, and even in my most intimate relationships, I'm thinking specifically with my lover, and how I'm blocked in so many ways, and how painful that is, and how it doesn't even feel like mine, you know? Like, I wanna take responsibility over it, so it feels like mine in that sense. But like you brought up how you had this sense that you were allowing things from your past, from behind you, like your grandmother, to come through you in that moment. It's like when I really tune into these blockages and these pains and these hindrances within my being and my expression, it really feels like so much of it is from the past, is from my roots, my familial roots, my ancestry, all the times that my parents and my grandparents and beyond held back or were forced down, were contained from a young age. And of course I look at my childhood and I was so contained in so many ways that are unfair, so
Mm.
unfair. And so of course, then as a 29-year-old man, there's going to be all these tangles that stop that free flow of communication and expression. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to reflect on that right now. And
Mm.
I guess it makes me wonder, um, like I have some ideas in my own way, but it makes me wonder about for you, like what are some ways where you are really intentionally um, going into those tangles and unraveling them for yourself? Like, of course, you had that
Mm.
moment of like deep expression. But of course, we can't always have that. We need more subtle ways of interacting with those tangles moment to moment. Is there anything that comes up for you around that right now?
Yeah, totally. This is like the juicy stuff for me, you know? It's kind of like coming back to the washing the dishes. Like, okay, this big thing happened, and then I'm gonna continue existing in the world and with all of that inside, you know? So, I mean, journaling has just been like a lifeline for me since I can remember. And what I have learned from many teachers is something called divine speak, where I just give myself permission to write, especially in the
Mm,
morning, right? Before I've even looked at anything. It could still be dark. It's better when it is dark and I can't even see what I'm writing, but it's to
mm,
write
mm,
and not even look at it. And then I burn that. And that was actually a really powerful ritual that I was practicing before I came back to Peru. I lived in Colombia in Santa Elena, which is it's in this part of Colombia that's known as the land of eternal spring. And I feel like it really did invite a springing forth energy in me after some time of being in the deep dark depths of winter before it actually was winter time.
mm,
And I looked through, I think, three journals that I'd been carrying with me from my travels, and I sat in front of the fire and it was cold. I was living in this cabin alone, choicefully, for a month. And there was this beautiful woman who held the space that became like my best friend. And I also want to acknowledge the presence of rosemary, the plant,
mm,
because you asked me what is something like a tool or way you've integrated and oriented to assimilate ceremony. And actually, it was rosemary that was growing on the land after sitting with yahe, which is another name for ayahuasca, for a week. When I found myself in this cabin and I just needed to not do anything and to have to make a fire every day and to go and collect a little sprig of rosemary and feel the spirit of my ancestors from the Mediterranean who would have cooked with this because it's
mm,
the dew of the sea and it grows so proliferously in places like Italy and Spain and Portugal, where my ancestors come from. And it was in a moment, this was in October, of just feeling like I am so deeply alone in this country. Nobody knows me. What am I doing here? And it was rosemary that I've actually learned is also a medicine for the thyroid that held me so deeply. So it was coming into this practice of everyday cooking again, and then burning my journal entries and reading them out loud to the fire as a way of just untangling the parts of myself that were still holding on to that rage, and just breathing and trusting that, you know, it was being answered. And I would practice Qigong in front of the fire for like an hour and just feel myself like in this alchemical process, and then let it go and just, you know, be. But I would say anytime I've written, opened myself to the practice of channeling, which as I say that word, I'm like, is that something I connect with? And I think it is, because I've been feeling it through this whole conversation, that to live in a body and be embodied is to acknowledge the the possibility of being a clear channel for life to move through. And the untangling has really been supported by these practices that allow some kind of an expression of words to move through me, and it doesn't need to necessarily be for anyone but that moment. And then it's gone. And working with fire, definitely. Because I think growing up, I always felt like I saw men making fires, and you know, we're with partners that were always the one making the fire. And then there was something really deeply and like ferociously empowering about like, I don't have anybody else here right now, so I'm just gonna do it. And this feels so good. And just like the trust fall, you know, like you can actually carry yourself. Even if there's a lot of pain right now, you can carry yourself.
Wow. Yeah, the fire. I just I interviewed another woman last week, and we were also talking about fire. It's feeling really important for her and her community and her friends at this time. And I didn't explore what I'm about to in that conversation, but you're reminding me of it now. It's interesting that you both bring it up because, of course, the fire has been this gathering place, the hearth. And I love that hearth has the word heart in it. It's been the center point of community for, I mean, potentially million plus years for human type beings. It's like, wow, can't even fathom that. So the fire is this place, and I know, you know, it's not very often in my experience that a group of people can gather when it's just like a informal gathering, and that there can be like like a sustained comfortability in silence. You know, usually there's interaction, communication happening, but you put a fireplace or a fire pit in the middle of all those people, and all of a sudden it becomes so much more easier for everyone to rest in the silence, to root down, you know, because it's like this ancient place of where you gather yourself up, or you're gathered up by grandmother and held in the embrace of the warmth, the embrace of community, of lineage, of safety. And so thank you for bringing it up. I think it's so important to be reconnecting with fire, and I look forward to that in my own life. I want to wrap this conversation up and with one last inquiry, and it really is around the hearth, but the hearth within our own bodies, that heart place where really I think the fires of transformation, creative capacity, balancing are held and sustained. And this is the inquiry of this project, is this prayer, this statement, this story, Wild Heart Revival. And I just want to know what that means to you in this moment.
Mm. Mm. Wild Heart Revival is the journey of this lifetime that I am so deeply grateful to come into relationship with, that knowing that, and to walk, to walk alongside other beings like yourself and the people listening that are curious about being here.
Mm-hmm.
It's this Wild Heart Revival to me is just the continued curiosity, this playful, childlike, animistic spirit and lens to approach each moment of my life through, so that these experiences can be for more than just Brooke. And I think actually of a card in my beloved tarot deck, which is the exemplar of arrows, and it's the master storyteller, and she is the one who wields fire.
Mm.
She is the one who wields the fire element. And so I guess I bring that in closing just because storytelling and the art, the lost art
Yeah.
of, sitting around the hearth and bringing all those pieces to warm the bones and the essence and the health of community.
Mm.
That's what this all means to me.
Mm.
And even though there hasn't been, a fire between us, I feel like this clay bowl and the smudge and our shared interest has, warmed something in me that
Mm.
just shows the power of opening this
Mm.
very potent center, our communication center, and seeing what shows up with really thoughtful inquiry and
Yeah.
trust. So that's what that means for me.
Mm.
Thank you.
I have absolutely loved this conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Me too. A
Yeah.
pleasure. And keep
Wow.
doing this. It's a beautiful, beautiful offering into the world.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it feels
Mm-hmm.
right. Feels right. It's meaningful. Do you want to direct people toward ways in which they can find out what you're up to, offerings you have, things like that?
Sure, yeah. The easiest way to find me is through good old Instagram. That's what I'm using the most right now, at Brooke Guiding Light. And yeah, I guess for people that are still with us, I'm offering regular qigong classes and energy medicine journeys online. There's usually some kind of a monthly theme or offering, and I'll be making a website soon when I get around to that being more and more of a priority. Or just reaching out, through a good old email as well, which I think is on my Instagram.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll link all that stuff in the show notes as well. Yeah.
Super.
Okay, well, thank you. And
Thank you, my friend.
we'll flow on with our day.